I welcome you all to our Earth and Life subject. So, good morning. Today, we will be discussing about life science. You know, our home planet Earth has more events occurring on it than we can imagine. So these events involve the living organism and inanimate structure, those we can see and those we can. So those events amaze us. So these events bring us a large number of questions that arise curiosity to explain and understand the world we live in and the world around us. So the answer of this question is science. Okay. So first, we have to read our learning competencies for this lesson. So the learners should be able to explain the evolving concept of life based on emerging pieces of evidence, describe classic experiments that model conditions which may have enabled the first forms to evolve, describe how unifying themes, example, the structure and function, evolution, and ecosystem, in the study of life, show the connection among living things and how they interact with each other and with the environment. Okay. Now, to start with, we have to define what is biology. So, biology is the natural science that studies life and living organisms, including their physical structure, chemical processes, molecular interaction, physiological mechanism, development, and evolution. Biology unraveled a story that started at least 3.8 billion years back in an aquatic environment devoid of life. So the first living cell came about as a result of ancient events wherein lifeless matter, which is the atoms and the molecules, so became organized into an entity capable of capturing and using energy and raw materials capable of sensing and responding to the environment and reproducing its own kind. So biology literally means study of life. So how do biologists study life and explore its complexities? Now, did you know that it is usually easy to recognize life, but it is often much harder to define it? Now, let us find out the early beliefs about the origin of life. So we have here the different theories about the origin of life. So first we have this special creation theory. So it is the theory of the supreme being, the supernatural being conceived as the perfect and omnipotent originator and ruler of the universe. So the object worshipped in monotheistic religion, which is God. Okay, so we have the divine creation. So this is the oldest hypothesis that life came from a divine being is the most widely accepted belief. It is believed that life forms and everything in the universe were created through a supernatural power rather than a naturalistic means. So the belief that life arose from nothing but the power of a divine being. This is called creationism. So creationists believe that everything was made by God in a 6-day period. Okay. Now, we move on to the spontaneous generation theory. So, this theory, a theory where living organisms arise from non-living things. So, centuries ago, people were puzzled about how life originated on Earth. So one belief that governed their thinking is the theory of spontaneous generation or the Biogenesis. So spontaneous generation is the idea that life could appear from non-living material. So this idea was proposed by Aristotle in the 4th century. Okay. Okay, so now we'll try to discuss the different theories about the spontaneous generation. So we have here Francisco Redi was born in Arezzo, Italy in 1626. He later lived in Florence where he became a physician and a poet. He created one of the first major experiments that disproved spontaneous generation. He managed to prove that maggots could not be formed from decaying meat in 1668. Okay, so this explained the experiment of Francisco Redi. His experiment setup involved disproving spontaneous generation using maggots that arose in decaying meat. So, what he did, he designed the experiment using two sets of jars that were identical but the other with a gauze covering. So Reddy observed that flies were attracted to both jars, but settled only on the meat on the open jar, since the gauze blocked flies from hovering onto the meat. So after several days, Reddy observed that maggots arose from eggs laid by flies on the rotten meat, but not on the meat in the covered jar. So therefore, Francisco Redi, he concluded that life arose from living matter, such as maggots from eggs, not from spontaneous generation in the meat. Okay. So how about John Needham? So this was in 1745. So this is the presentation of his experiment about spontaneous generation. So in 1748, English priest John Needham, he challenged about Reddy's experiment. So it was a common knowledge at the time that boiling could kill microorganisms. So Needham's experiment tested whether or not microorganisms can appear spontaneously after boiling. So he placed a solution of boiled mutton broth in a container and heated it. Then he sealed it with corks, proving that it could prevent anything from the environment from entering the flask and generate life. So, after several days, Needham observed that the broth turned cloudy and full of microorganisms. So then, By that, he concluded that life in the broth was caused by spontaneous generation. But in actuality, he did not hit it long enough to kill all the microbes in the broth. Okay. So now we have Louis Pasteur. So we will try to find out also his experiment. So it was only in 1861 through Louis Pasteur's experiment that the most scientists were convinced that spontaneous generation could not occur. So Pasteur designed an experiment to test the idea that a vital element from air was necessary for life to occur. So what he did was he boiled sugar solution with this in the flask with a long neck. So the flasks were left open to allow the vital element in air to enter, but then no organism developed in the mixture. So it was because the microorganism settled on the bottom of the curved neck of the flask. Okay, so you can see the curved neck also on the flask. So this was the flask that Louis Pasteur was using. So he also cut the neck of the flask, and within 2 days, the solution was teeming with organisms. So because airborne microorganisms could easily enter the flask. So this experiment supported the theory of biogenesis and disproved spontaneous generation. So this evidence suggests that new bacteria appear only when they are produced by pre-existing bacteria. Okay. So this is the presentation of Louis Pasteur's one-neck experiment. That Pasteur experiment to disprove the theory of spontaneous generation, because it shows evidence that new bacteria appear only when they are produced by pre-existing bacteria. Okay, now we'll move on to Lazarus Spallanzani. So let us find out also his presentation about spontaneous generation. So it was in 1767. This Lazzaro Spallanzani is an Italian scientist. So he was the one who challenged Needham experiment. So Spallanzani boiled a broth containing meat and vegetables. So he placed in a clean glass container. So both containers were boiled, but one setup was not sealed. Okay. So the setup was allowing air to enter the flask. Then, after several days, the open container was filled with population of microorganisms. Then, the sealed container remained sterile. So it is also clear in his presentation in this diagram. So, therefore, he concluded that life occurred from something that entered the unsealed flask, and that it was the one responsible for life to grow. So the results were not really taken completely by the believers of abiogenesis. So who even stated that Spallanzani excluded air from his sealed flask, so which they believe was also needed for spontaneous generation to occur. So that was the reason why those believers of abiogenesis did not believe on his spontaneous generation experiment. Okay? Now, there are also controversy over spontaneous generation of John Needham and Lazzaro Spallanzani. Okay, so here are the representation. So problem, what causes tiny living things to appear in decaying broth? So according to Spallanzani's hypothesis that microbes come from the air, so boiling will kill them. While Needham hypothesis, spontaneous generation, that life in the broth was caused by spontaneous generation. But what he forget was he did not heat long enough for the microbes to be killed. So that was the possibility that there is a growth of microbes. Okay. So another theory of the origin of life is panspermia. So panspermia proposes that a meteor or cosmic dust may have carried to Earth significant amount of organic molecules, so, which started the evolution of life. See? So this was in 1966, in which, according to panspermia, that a meteorite that was found in Antarctica suggested that it had been ejected from Mars, possibly by a collision with an asteroid. So the meteorite contained presence of complex organic molecules and small globules which resemble those found on Earth. So this is how they believe. So the theory which states that life on Earth originated from microorganisms present in the outer space. So light traveled between worlds on asteroids and cosmic bodies. Okay. So what do you think? Does these different theories or events differentiate spontaneous generation from panspermia? Okay. So now we have the lightning. So it is said that lightning produce simple sugars and amino acid from simple elements. Then light starts. Now, another one, beneath the ice. So, ice protected the compounds, allowing them to interact, and then it creates life. See? So, now we have to discuss about abiogenesis. So, when we say abiogenesis, this is what we mean creation without life. So this is the opposite of the biogenesis. So this is how biological life arises from inorganic matter through natural process. So we have here uh, some example of abiogenesis. So it was Aristotle that proposed the theory of spontaneous generation. So when he observed that the aphids arise from dew which falls on plants, so flies from putrid matter from dirty hay, crocodiles from rotting logs at the bottom of bodies of water, and so on and so forth. So this was this experiment was presented by Aristotle that life came from biogenesis. Okay. So how about biogenesis theory, which says life begets life? So this belief originates from pre-existing cells. So it states that living things are produced from living things only and can be created in no other way. Okay? So this theory is completely opposite to this spontaneous generation theory. So since then, several experiments have been conducted to prove this contradicting beliefs to know how life came about. Now, it comes in now with the RNA world. So this RNA world can tell us how life started. So we have here the ribonucleic acid, which is the RNA, that can support the theory of biogenesis, that life originates from pre-existing life. Okay? So when we say life science, it is a study of plants, animals, human beings, and microscopic organisms. So life science versus biology. So again, class, I want you to put this in mind that all living organs are made up of cells. So everything, every part of our body is made up of cells. So again, as what I have told you, that all organisms are made up of cells. So the level of organization first is from cell, then tissue, this tissue into organ, because organ comprises of tissues, then tissues comprises of cells. So organ system comprises of organs, then this organ system now can help produce organism. So we are one example of an organism. Human, it can be plants and animals. Anything that has life. Okay. Now, life process are the basic processes in living organism, so which are necessary for maintaining life. So now we will have to discuss the characteristics that all living things share. But before that, I would like you to give a little background about life, or unifying themes about life. We are surrounded by living and non-living things, but sometimes it is not easy to decide which one are living and which one are not. So living things on earth share common characteristics or properties typically not found in inanimate things. So through the properties of life discussed below, or we will discuss later, are typical of all living organisms. So some of them may not be present in an organism at every point in its life cycle. So particular example pertains to reproduction and growth, wherein some organisms may have reached a point in their life that they stop reproducing. Okay. So characteristics that all living things have in common are growth, reproduction. They are made up of cells. So they respond and adapt to their environment and obtain and utilize energy. So an organism must exhibit all these characteristics to be classified as a living thing. However, living organisms can have different levels of cellular organization. One unique characteristic of living things is the ability to use energy and matter to ensure survival. So again, energy is the ability of organisms to do work that allows them to move. Okay. So, for example, there are non-living things that can exhibit one or more of these characteristics, such as sugar crystal. So, although sugar crystal can grow, they are non-living substances. So, I hope it is clear. So, uh, for you to easily classify which one is non-living things and which one are living things or living substances. So similarly, although all living organisms can have these basic characteristics, these are differences. There are also differences. So for example, certain living organisms can reproduce through either asexual or sexual reproduction. So likewise, the level of cellular organization is more complex in a multicellular organism than in a unicellular one. So we have here some unicellular organisms. So these are the example of unicellular organism. And what are difference between unicellular and multicellular? Okay, so let's just have an overview of this. So unicellular, made of one cell. Single cell performs all life functions. Eat, reproduce, get rid of waste, and move. So we have the example in the previous slides. You have amoeba and the bacteria. So when you say unicellular, made of one cell, so they perform all the life functions. Now for the multicellular, made of more than one cell. Again, it is made of more than one cell. It is a specialized cell, perform different life function. Example, the nerve cell. Example, in human, you can find nerve cells in human in which can perform different life functions. Okay? So that is their difference. Unicellular can only perform a single cell performs all life forms, but in multicellular, it can perform different life functions. Okay, so try to remember. So we have here the pattern for the multicellular organism. So try to look at the nerves. So this is how they function. Okay. So now we will discuss the 7 characteristics of life. As what I have said in our previous slides, that life processes are the basic processes in living organism. So which are necessary for maintaining their life. So these are the 7 characteristics of life. So I would like to present this to you. What are these 7 characteristics? So first, we have nutrition, then sensitivity, respiration, excretion, growth, movement, and we have the reproduction. So again, as what I have said, that one unique characteristic of living things is the ability to use energy and matter to ensure survival. So energy is the ability of organisms to do work that allows them to move. So these characteristics share in all living organism. Okay, so we will discuss this one by one. Okay. Okay, so now we will discuss first the sensitivity. So when we say sensitivity, this is how your immediate response to the stimulus or the irritability. Your immediate response to stimulus, how sensitive the organism in response to the stimulus. So when you say stimulus, this is something from the external environment that affects individual. Okay. And your response, this is the reaction to the stimulus. Now, you have here an example. The plant. Plant responds to light by facing the sun. So if you are going back, how plant do survive is through photosynthesis, right? So where does the plant get energy? Of course, it is from the sun. Now, how about this picture in the middle? A man pouring out water on his forehead because the man feels hot. So what do you usually do if you feel hot? Sometimes you have to splash water in your face, or it's either you have to drink water because your body feels heat. So that is the stimulus there is the heat, and your response to the stimulus is you have to drink water or you have to splash water into your body or into your face. Okay. Okay, now let's move on to respiration. So respiration is the process in which energy is released from food. You know that all life processes require energy. All living things carry out respiration to burn food into energy for life processes. So it occurs in all living things at a cellular level. Now, the food reacts with oxygen. So, to release water, carbon dioxide, plus the energy. So, try to look at the equation. So, you have sugar plus carbon dioxide, then plus water plus energy. So that sugar represents the glucose plus oxygen, then that produces carbon dioxide, then plus water and energy. So the total of all chemical reaction in an organism, that is what you call the metabolism. So you have here the anabolism plus catabolism is equal to the metabolism. So this is how the equation shows us. Okay, so let's move on to the locomotion. When we say locomotion, then this is how organisms move. So movement. Many things are observed moving. But my question is, you don't see plants running around? So how do they move? Okay. All living things move blood or fluids within the organism. So there is movement in each individual cell. And that is what you call the cytoplasmic streaming. Okay? So every organism move. So try to look at this. So this is how the animal move. And the human, try to look at the movement, the balance, and of course, the cilia and the flagella. So you also know how they move in locomotion. So cilia are slender that project from much of a larger celled body. And a flagella is a lash like appendage that protrudes from the cell body. So every organism has the ability to move in their own way. Okay. Now, let's move on to the growth and development. So, when we say growth, all living things undergo stages of growth and development determined by their own genetic codes. So, what does it mean? Genetic codes involved. Kung lahi kayo ng matatangkad, then automatically, mamana nyo yun. Diba? So growth occurs because cells divide, causing to be more numerous, which causes organism to get bigger. And development occurs when cells take specific jobs within the organism. Okay. So they also have their own function. So this is the way how organisms grow and develop from the start until the death. Okay? As what we've said, that there is always death in all living organisms. That is why they need to multiply. They need to reproduce. So in that way, there is always a continuity of the species and, of course, the transfer of the hereditary information to another organism. Okay, now we will move on to reproduction. So reproduction is the process of reproducing new organisms of the same type. Okay, so as you can see, we have here animals, plants. How do they reproduce? It could be in sexual reproduction, or it can also be in asexual reproduction. Since there are two kinds of reproduction, so it can be sexual or it can be asexual. Okay? Now, How about nutrition? Nutrition is also important. So nutrition, all living take essential nutrients from their environment. So these nutrients give them energy and allow them to grow and develop for their survival. So class, again, I want to tell you that all living organisms need to feed in order to survive, grow, and of course to reproduce. So in plants, nutrition is performed by absorbing water and minerals from the soil and carbon dioxide from the air. So animals from non-green plants and some microorganisms fed on organic food obtained from plants and other animals. So these acquired foods are sources of energy. So how about non-living things? Also absorb water and minerals. So like in the case of filter paper or a ball of cotton. But unlike living things, they are unable to convert the absorbed substance to become part of themselves. Okay? So that is the difference between living things and non-living things. So in living organism, once raw materials are inside the body, it will be processed through various chemical reactions for repair, reproduction, manufacture of new body parts, or continuous supply of energy for essential activities. Okay? So you need this food for your survival. Now, after taking up nutrients, of course, what you have to do is to process all the raw food that you take into. Okay. So when we say excretion, all living things excrete. So what does it mean? So waste products are removed from the body. So it can be plants or animals. So both have to get rid of the waste, gas, and water. So simply, excretion is the removal from organisms toxic materials. So it needs to get rid of those. So the waste product of metabolism. So what do you think are the waste product of metabolism? Okay, let's talk about chemical reaction in cells. So this includes respiration. So once you perspire, so you are already removing those toxins in your body. So living things have all these characteristics and they are made up of cells. So I would like to stress that again. Okay. So this is how you're going to eliminate your waste products through skin. Then you have the sweat, kidneys, then you have your urine. That is why you need to urinate every now and then. Then the lungs, that is the carbon dioxide. That is the one you are exhaling. You are inhaling oxygen, then of course you are exhaling the carbon dioxide, and that is for the human. But the plants, of course, they do excrete the oxygen and they take in the carbon dioxide. Okay? So I hope I made things clear in this discussion or in this particular lesson. Okay. So again, this is how important life processes are. All organisms share common characteristics that guide us in defining what we mean by life. So class, this is now the end of our discussion. So thank you for listening. If you have some questions, then you can call me anytime or please log into our e-learning site. It is posted here. So for additional resources and for our discussion for today, you can also uh, go over and read some resources which are posted also in our learning path. And for the activities and the quiz, for the assessment, so please try to go over and try to answer all of that. And next week, we'll be having another topic to tackle. So good luck and God bless. So please be safe, everyone. See you next